BRICS currency, Zimbabwe, and the US dollar. Good day from wherever you are watching. Thank you very much for taking the time to watch this video. Welcome to the Soothsayer. Recently, I have been watching videos about the BRICS currency, which got me thinking. The majority of these videos were pessimistic, but some informative. In this video, I'm going to show you how the BRICS currency, Zimbabwe, and the American dollar are going to teach us something new in economics. Note that what I'm going to be talking about in this video is history-making in the field of economics. I know that it sounds ridiculous at first glance to include Zimbabwe and the United States of America in the same sentence, but please hear me out as I will lay out everything perfectly in a way that makes sense to you. Note that I personally do not wish ill of America, as it is a great country overall. I like its generosity to the less fortunate and sometimes ungrateful countries. But they still continue with their generosity. In the past few months, it was reported that the BRICS Bank is busy developing a currency which will be an alternative to the US dollar. It was also rumored to likely be around $33 per BRICS currency, which I don't believe it's true. I've drawn this belief after looking at the impact of the euro when it was first introduced. I think it will likely be slightly more than the dollar, but for the purpose of this video, I will assume that it will be on the same value to the dollar. Now, I want you to first note that the BRICS membership is very, very high in demand, and I can safely say to you that this group of nations is going to be a force to be reckoned with due to the caliber of the members who have joined it. What I also like about this group is that the membership is not just being handed over to every Dick and Tom that wants to join, as we have seen with the rejection of Nigeria. Please first note that I live in South Africa. SA just received a loan from the BRICS Bank not so long ago, and it was for a few problems that we experienced. Thanks God our leaders kept their promise of using the money for its purpose. We are now seeing some of these problems being solved, at least on face value. Why am I telling you this? Well, I'm telling you this because after the BRICS currency has been developed, it is now going to be used in giving loans to the member nations and other clients who qualify for the loans. Let us assume that South Africa in a year or so takes another loan which is then given in the BRICS currency. This will result in South Africa doing a lot of international transactions with other BRICS members in the same currency, as it will make no sense for South Africa to buy something from Brazil or Saudi Arabia in dollars, when these nations will already be using this currency as the medium of exchange. This is where my point starts. South Africa supplies around 10 smaller countries in Africa with products as it orders them in large quantities, and then redistributes them in smaller quantities as these countries have smaller populations. These products are bought and then resold by businessmen in those countries. Such products I know of include electronic products like phone chargers, and also include second-hand clothes. These smaller countries have businessmen who have savings in dollars stashed somewhere in case something happens. These businessmen will soon realize that there's no sense in keeping dollars, which still needs to be converted to the BRICS currency in case they want to take advantage of an opportunity. It is also costly too, as there's bank charges involved. As the adoption of the BRICS currency grows as a result of the development loans keep being dished out to the member states, all of whom are developing nations. This will kickstart the beginning of the end of the American dollar as the reserve currency. Now, this whole situation will then kickstart a chain of events. When these businessmen and other people start returning their dollars back to the US, it will create a currency crisis, which will lead to a depreciation of the dollar. The continued depreciation will present an opportunity to the currency traders, who will make it even worse by exploiting this gap. In Africa, there's a lot of teachers and nurses who are preparing for their retirement, and their savings are in dollars. When the dollar starts depreciating, imagine the impact this will cause when they start exchanging the dollar to avoid losing the value of their savings. Now, this is where Zimbabwe comes in. You might ask, where does Zimbabwe feature in all of this? Well, listen on then. I will explain everything nicely, for those that may not be aware of the Zimbabwean situation. In the early 2000s, Zimbabwe was ruled by a dictator called Robert Mugabe. This dictator experienced a lot of economic problems, which included shortage of funds to finance government spending. To answer this, he opted for the easiest and the quickest step available, which is to print more notes. At first it was working because he would just print notes and pay the teachers and the police. Top economic experts warned him about the dangers of this practice in the economy, but he never listened, and instead he ridiculed them by calling them textbook economists who think they know everything, but know nothing. The Zimbabwean currency lost all its value, and at some point it was worth far less than a cent. At this point, he was now forced to abandon this policy, as it was just no longer working. At one stage, people were using a 10 trillion note, which I think is the only currency to reach that level. People were buying bread with notes the same size in number as the bread itself. It was just plain ridiculous. Now this example relates to the US dollar, because the point where the Zimbabwean dictator was forced to abandon the currency printing is the point where the US is going to find itself in when the people in developing countries start returning the dollar. The only difference between Zimbabwe and the US is that the US will start from the point where Zimbabwe abandoned the printing, and the only difference is that the US has already printed the notes, and they are all out there and just waiting to be returned. This means that they don't have an option of stopping the printing. Under normal circumstances, this is a disaster. After a few years of the currency exchanges with the dollar continuing to lose its value, more and more financial advisors around the world will advise their clients to exchange the dollar to avoid losing more of their money, and to do so while it's still early. In the US, this will lead to what is phrased in economic books as a lot of money chasing too few goods. This normally leads to inflation, which leads to economic hardship, as a lot of small things will become unaffordable for average to middle-income earners. Americans who are listening to this video can watch videos of what happened in Zimbabwe during this time, as things are likely to be the same, if not worse. This is because the US looks like it has overprinted its notes as it can afford to do so, and now that everyone trusts its reserve bank. What I have noticed is that a lot of these notes are not being used and are just being stashed away somewhere, just in case something happens. I personally don't think that the US will just sit back and keep returning money they don't have and accumulate more and more debt just like that. No ways. I firmly believe that they will start coming up with tricks just to mitigate or soften the impact of this exchange to their economy. The only example of a trick they can use is trying to refuse some of the notes due to a clause in their law, which says that all returned notes must be in a good and acceptable condition. This point is ambiguous. It will give an opportunity for the banks in the US to reject a lot of notes, even for the slightest of damage or tear. They will then advise you to at least buy something with them. Another thing which I think they might try and use is another ambiguous point, which says that when you hold a US dollar note, it means that the US Reserve Bank owes you a value of $1. This means they owe you a value, which they can claim is anything of similar value. In this point, I imagine an African businessman trying to return $10,000. Instead of being given an equivalent currency of his choice to the same value, they give him 10 iPhones. When he questions why not money of the same value, and they claim that the law says that we owe you a value of $10,000, and it does not specify that it must only be in monetary terms. Value can be anything of the same value. I foresee this going to court, and the judge then rules that there's nothing wrong with being given something of the same value. This is according to me, and might not happen, as I put it. Tell me what you think on the comments below. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe so that I can continue producing videos like this one. Thank you very much for watching. Have a wonderful day.